Thank you so much to everyone for joining. My name is Rena Ehrenreich. I'm the Program's Engagement Associate for SPS and Sigma Pi Sigma. I just want to talk a bit about why we're here today, what we're going to chat about. So, um, this is a really special webinar highlighting Dr. Josef Koller, who is what we would call a hidden physicist. The idea of a hidden physicist or a hidden astronomer is someone who obtained their undergraduate and even graduate degrees in these fields of physics and or astronomy, but now have moved on to do something else. And these professionals really highlight the versatility of obtaining these degrees and prove that you're always going to be a physicist, you're always going to be an astronomer, because you're always going to be implementing those unique skills that you learned while in those degrees. This highlighting of hidden physicists and showing you all of these career paths comes as a part of SPS and Sigma Pi Sigma's efforts to re-engage all of our Sigma Pi Sigma alumni and really show all of these different career paths that our members have taken. When we work with our alumni in workshops, our specialized newsletters, and webinars such as these, we're really utilizing them to teach current undergraduates that their knowledge and their capabilities are valued throughout all fields, and we're really helping them understand and prepare for their future. So at any point throughout this webinar, if you have questions, please pop them in the Q&A chat. You can do that at any time. And I'll hand it over to our director, Alejandro, to introduce Dr. Koller.
All right, thanks, Rihanna. I hope you all can hear me. Hello, everyone. My name is Alejandro de la Puente, and I serve as the director of the Society of Physics Students and also Sigma Pi Sigma, our honor society. At SPS, our mission is to ensure that the undergraduate voice helps shape the future of the physical sciences in academia, in society, and in the workforce. A key part of that mission is connecting our community of students with alumni who are leading change across science, industry, and society. And here I'm using the word alumni very broadly. I think an alumni is someone who can connect back to that, those physics and astronomy days, wherever they are today in their life. So it is in that spirit that I'm honored to introduce today's hidden physicist / astrophysicist, Dr. Josef Koller. Dr. Koller is a global leader in space sustainability with more than 25 years of experience. He currently leads the space safety and sustainability efforts at Amazon's Project Cooper, building a satellite network to expand broadband connectivity around the world. His distinguished career has spanned national security, policy, and research, from advising the Office of the Secretary of Defense on space policy to co-founding the Space Safety Institute to leading scientists at Los Alamos National Laboratory. We're thrilled to have him with us today, and I know this perspective will inspire all of us as we think about the impact physicists can make far beyond the classroom. So with that, we'll kick it off directly to the questions, because I think we're here to learn from Dr. Koller. So I'll let Rihanna kick us off. Thanks, Rihanna.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. And so to begin, why did you become an astrophysicist?
Well, I did not always wanted to become an astrophysicist. It was actually sort of maybe my second or third choice. I wanted to be an astronaut, right? That was just always my dream when I came up, when I grew up. But I grew up in a very small country, right? Country of Austria. At that point had like 7 million people, so very few people. There was just not a whole lot of opportunities to become an astronaut, right? But as I was watching, I was just so hooked on Star Trek. Now I'm giving away my age. Today's young generation, they're probably more into Kerbal Space and those kind of video games, but I was really hooked on Star Trek, right? And so space just was always hugely fascinating to me. And I wanted to learn more about, so my first choice was actually to become an astronaut. But there's no space program in Austria, at least at that time. And so I just started thinking about what is my second choice? What is really that fascinates me? In addition to being an adventure, right? Being an astronaut seems like you want to have more adventures, and that would really fit me well, as would really fit me too. But so my next choice was, I'm thinking of Mr. Spock, of course, with all the smart and knowledgeable and just knowing how to analyze things. I wanted to become an astronomer as my second choice. And so, again, I grew up in a very small country place. None of my family really had a high school education. I was the first one in my family out of four. I have three siblings out of four children. I was the first one to go to high school. And my mom always encouraged me to really pursue my passion, right? Even though they did not understand what is it really about astronomy or astrophysics that fascinates me, but they always wanted me to pursue my passion for looking for knowledge and trying to understand how the world really works. And so, I was the first one to finish high school. I went on to study at the University of Innsbruck in Austria. And really things started to fall into place from there. So it was really the pursuit of knowledge that drove me towards the sciences. But later on throughout the conversation, I think it also becomes a broader conversation after that as well. And as we talked about in a prep call here, happy to share some of my stories. I think this is a really great program that you're putting together. And the name Hidden Physicist is absolutely appropriate. Although I would say I use my physics knowledge and the training to absorb the physics knowledge like every day. And happy to go into more details like that.
Well, that's awesome. I guess, with that, so, you started in a small country, obviously, you could jumpstart your career there, but then obviously you left Austria. And I guess a question is, for someone who makes that kind of decision like that to leave their home country, you just mentioned the importance of family being the people behind you, always encouraging you, and then transition into another country like the US. Why did you decide to come to the US? Maybe specifically, or why did you even decide to leave to pursue your PhD country and not, for example, stay in Europe? And what are some of the lessons learned that got you here? Like what would you advise a student that is thinking about the same thing, right? Making that leap of faith and leaving that family, that nucleus to pursue something they really love?
That's a really good question because it leads to a piece of advice that I got from a professor at the University of Innsbruck. And, starting early on in undergraduate program of physics and astronomy, it became clear fairly quickly that if you want to pursue a career in physics or astronomy, you do kind of have to go for a PhD as well. Right? Otherwise, you're starting to, you probably have to choose something differently. So the best advice, or one of the better advice I got from this professor at the University of Innsbruck was to go somewhere else and then come back. I got the impression I could have probably stayed around and continued into a PhD program, but his advice to go somewhere else is really what I learned later on is to learn from other people. So what I realized then later on in my career is every time I moved somewhere else, started working with different people, the learning, the information that you absorb, the opportunities to absorb more information, how other people think about a particular problem, how they interact, how they build a community, is very different from where you came from. So every time, what I think is actually happening is that sort of the knowledge absorption curve is really, really big in the beginning, because you're working with different people, they have new approaches, new methodologies, and so forth. But once you've worked with them for a number of years, that knowledge absorption that you have from the team members or the people that you're working with starts to diminish a little bit, right? Because you're starting to get attuned to their type of thinking and the amount of knowledge that you're absorbing. So every time you're actually going somewhere else, you have a great opportunity of learning new things, different approach and different methodologies. And so when I left, so I decided to pursue a PhD, and I applied for a number of different universities, but then ultimately I decided to go to the United States. And what I realized is that I thought my professor in Austria was like the best and the greatest. And I still think that. But when I went to the university in the United States, they had a whole different way of thinking about it, different methods, different numerical techniques. And it was like, wow, I never thought that this actually, I could do this too, right? And so this is actually something I experienced every single time I decided to, change the group that I'm working with or slightly change careers, that the amount of knowledge that is offered to you to absorb from different people just is orders of magnitude bigger in the beginning. And so, there's no right and wrong to stay a certain amount of time with the same group, but it's just something to consider about. Think about not just the risks that you're taking by moving somewhere else, especially abroad, but also think about the opportunities of learning, the new knowledge that you can gain by, working with a different group of people.
Thank you, Rihanna. One quick follow-up. And what would you advise a student that is in your shoes today, right, and making this decision? What would you advise them in order to make the right choice? Because I think, as somebody coming from another country, obviously it's expensive to apply to different programs, but there are many programs. What's a quick, little bit of advice you can provide a student in your shoes?
You have to, I think about what do you enjoy more, right? And again, there's no right or wrong. But I started realizing at one point, I enjoy learning new things, right? Other people enjoy diving really, really deep into one particular field. And so I'm just somebody who enjoys learning more new things rather than being the only single expert in the world.
Yeah.
This very particular subtopic, right? And you might have only, in the world, there might be only 3 or 4 or 5 colleagues that actually understand what you're talking about, right? Because you're so deep. You're such a unique expert in this very particular field, which is great, right? If that's something you enjoy, might get you a Nobel Prize, right?
Yeah.
I'm somebody who enjoys learning, broader, getting a little bit broader. And so as you're thinking about when you see particular career doors are opening, think about, is this something interesting that you might enjoy doing? Is the knowledge that you would be gaining or the team that you would be working with, is this something is this interesting, exciting? Are you passionate about this? Or, but it could also be, maybe you want to choose something that just, instead of becoming more broader, helps you become more of a deeper expert in something. And so this is something you can weigh off as opportunities open. And, there's always a door that opens in one way or another as your careers progress, as you meet different people, interact with different people at conferences. You always have sometimes doors opening, but it's up to you to decide, is this something you want to pursue in light of, do you want to be more broader? Maybe not the leading world expert on something, but maybe you enjoy being more broader. Or do you want to be really working towards being that leading expert on that very particular topic?
Thanks. That's great. Thank you. Rihanna?
Yeah, well, speaking of broadening your horizons, looking for new opportunities, looking for new ways to apply your skills, what drew you to switch from astrophysics research to space policy?
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, that's a very big shift, right? But at one point, I started reading more about, or I was working on research proposals, right? I was desperately trying to get funding for a particular research in space weather modeling, and I kept getting rejected, right? And I started soliciting help from some colleagues, people who were successful in obtaining funding and research proposals. And one big advice that I I took away from those conversations was that is math, often we describe math as a universal language, but actually they changed my mind. It's really English. The written language is a universal language because the equations that you're writing down are not well understood by a large group of people. But you need to learn how to write we call it often the scientific American level of writing, right? It's scientific, but it can be read and understood by a much broader group of people. In particular, when it comes to research proposals, right? You might not have your colleague on that selection panel for that research proposal who understands, the minute details that you're trying to research. So you need to be able to level up a little bit and describe it at a much broader level so other people can get excited about the research that you're pursuing. But that led me ultimately to trying to understand why is, language maybe one skill, unique skill that's really important to have and how you convey an idea and be convincing. The second idea is how do people even make those decisions, right? Even if you're having a very convincing argument and something that resonates with people, how are people making these type of policy decisions? Why are certain proposals being funded or certain topics being funded versus others? Right. And so that led me to start reading a little bit more about policy making, science and research policy. And, in my early days of my physics career, I always thought of social sciences as, that's weak, that's too soft, there's no real science in social sciences. But the more I started reading about it, no, it's actually they're doing real research, collecting data, trying to analyze the data, trying to understand this really complex system of the human mind and how people make decisions. And that started really, an interest in me. And at one point, I had this great opportunity to pursue a sort of test out the waters kind of thing, because at that point, I was at a national laboratory. And national laboratories have options to send somebody under an IPA program. It's called the Intergovernmental Personnel Agreement Program to a government agency while still being employed by your home agency. So you get to go to an agency to help them, provide them with science advice and so forth. And I had this great opportunity to support the Secretary of Defense for Space Policy for 4 years at the Pentagon. And that really kickstarted off a whole nother area of interest, which is, not just the policy making, but how, and it goes back to the research proposals that I had so much trouble with. How do you tell a story that resonates with somebody, right? There was a famous saying, people might forget what you have said, but they will always remember how you made them feel, right? And so the key skill here is to find out when you're writing research proposals, how do you write the story that resonates with somebody else who might read it? So, long story short, picking up on the earlier theme of I'm really getting excited and interested about new topics. And so this is an opportunity, a door that opened for me. And coupled with that interest in how policy decisions being made, I made that choice. Had the opportunity to make that choice and support the Pentagon in that role for 4 years. And then me and my family, we decided to stay in the Washington, D.C. area. To pursue on that line of thinking, because after 4 years being out of the research field, and as you're getting older, the next generation is coming up, you start realizing, man, those young professionals, those graduate postdocs, they're just so much faster in programming certain things or thinking about certain things. You start to lose that. And, after 4 years being out of that hardcore science field. I did space weather analysis and radiation belt modeling at that time. You start losing a little bit of touch. It would have been feasible to go back. And actually, that's the initial idea of going back to the laboratory. But it would have been hard, right, to go back and find your niche again in this field. But anyway, so that kind of drew me. That's my story from pursuing new interests and opening as new doors open. Trying to understand, is this something you're interested or excited about? And that just worked out for me very well at that moment in time.
So, so this is great. I guess it was a calling, right? That you saw kind of a need for good communicating this very very specific science, which took you in this more broader direction. But there's also this still your love for science that allow you to explore that the fact that in fact science was being used for decision making, which is awesome. But what catalyzed the shift? Like, was it an opportunity? Was it like a fellowship? Or should you just sat there and said, "Look, I really want to explore this. I'm just going to apply for things. I'm going to work on my CV, my resume." How did you make that transition more tactically?
Tactically, again, it's an opportunity, and sometimes you find these very unique opportunities that just are presented to you. And so I distinctly remember when I was at the laboratory, at the National Laboratory, we had a visitor coming by from State Department.
Mhm.
And at that time, I was starting to look at satellite, upper atmosphere debris modeling, upper atmosphere density modeling, space debris modeling, those kind of things. And this individual showed up from State Department. He was a government official, and he invited, so the laboratory was able to bring some young professionals along, and he spoke about things like the United Nations. What is like the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space doing and with regards to space sustainability, space safety, maintaining access to space, and those kind of things. And it was just very interesting to listen to him and his experience in working with United Nations as a State Department official. And it was just I started, even though I was kind of a junior member at that table, but I was brave enough, and that's, I think, my other advice to the audience here is be brave. And I was brave enough to ask really a number of questions. And he reached out to me afterwards and say, yeah, let's just keep that dialogue open. He had some really good and thought-provoking questions. So these are just sometimes things that you do that you can trace back to something that leads to something else, right? And I have a number of those stories that I'd be happy to talk more about. And I see, Alejandro, you're smiling. You probably know which one I'm thinking of. But
Oh, good. I would like you to share,
yeah,
one you're, more dearest to your heart.
yeah. So anyway, so a piece of advice was, again, a professor from Innsbruck gave me at one point. It was actually to the whole class. And it was seminars, everybody had to present a research paper that they've read, and people were kind of quiet, right? But he was a professor who always had a question at the end, right? And at one point, he seemed frustrated that, the students are presenting a paper talking about the research they were reading about, but nobody was asking a question. And he was frustrated, and he told us, look, it is your job. You need to ask at least one question. Nobody will hear you if you don't ask a question. So everybody at these seminars, you have to ask a question. Everybody has to ask a question. And it's interesting because as I went along with my career and attending different meetings and seminars, I always have that his voice in my head is like, Joseph, you got to ask a question, right? There's no stupid question, but if you're not raising your hand and be brave enough to ask a question, you're putting yourself on a lower level than everybody else. Everybody can ask a question, right? And so that's another interesting advice that I got from a professor at the University of Innsbruck.
Thank you, Brianna.
Yeah, that was really fantastic. Thank you. And maybe we'll do one more of our questions before we open it up to everyone else. So, you've kind of hit on this before, talked about broadening your horizons, how you really like exploring, but how did you feel about your career kind of taking on this more general direction to space policy? And how did you ever struggle with that in any way?
Not so much a struggle. Like I said earlier, I really enjoyed always learning new things. But maybe the story I want to tell here at this point is, looking back, and we talked about the defining moments in my career, and I really hope everybody in the audience here has a similar moment because it was really defining. But you have sometimes these singular moments where you're faced with a decision and you can turn either left or you can turn right. But then as life goes on, your whole career, your whole life, everything, the reason I'm sitting here now, I can go back and trace back to the single decision that I made at that point, which is like, probably 30 years ago now. So the story is I went with one of my professors to a conference in Germany. And like all the science conferences, was presenting a paper. There's always a dinner event on one of the evenings, right? And I showed up, on time or fashionably late, maybe 2 or 3 minutes late. You imagine a big room, like a gala room with lots of round tables and people already sitting down. And I looked at one side of the room and I see my advisor sitting there and talking to some colleagues. And on the other side of the room, I see a professor from the United States that I wanted to talk to because he had similar research interests. I read some of his papers and so forth. And so I was faced with this decision. I'm looking at this big room, all these people there. I could do the easy road and just sit with my advisor, right? He will probably tell me the same stories. He's always told me the same thing, right? But then I decided to be brave. I decided to be brave and go and sit with this person I have really looked up to for the last year or so, read his papers. But I felt like to need to muster all my bravery and sit next to him so I can strike up a conversation with him and maybe we can exchange some research thoughts and ideas and so forth. And that's what I did. And ultimately, we struck up a very nice conversation. He actually was turned out very interested in my poster and the research that I was working on. And he ultimately invited me to give a seminar at his university. And I was lucky enough, I got a fellowship from the dean to go visit his university. I gave a seminar, and ultimately I was invited to pursue the PhD program there. This was about the time I was looking for finishing my master's and looking for a place to do my PhD. And I decided to go there, and in the end. And I just keep thinking back, what if I had decided to sit with my advisor, right? And he would have told me the same stories. But instead, I decided to sit at this other table and be brave. But it led up to all these other things. And, ultimately, I went to study in the United States. I got a PhD here. I went to a national laboratory. I got an opportunity at the Pentagon, stayed in the DC area, and now I'm at Amazon Kuiper. Right? Everything starting my family here in the United States. I would have never met my wife, my kid, my children. All this traces back to that single moment in my life where I decided to be brave. So my advice to all, all the listeners today is be brave. Choose the unknown over the known, because you never know what doors it will open for you and where it will take your life. You will not find out right away, but as life goes on, maybe this was one of those deciding moments that you made that choice.
No, yeah, and that's a great story because I mean, and the way I think of destiny is that destiny hasn't happened until it has happened, and then you try to connect the
That's
dots and
right.
you see it,
Yeah.
and then you see it all evolve, right? Which is kind of a beautiful way of a physicist to looking at destiny as a kind of very complex set of almost like a path integral, you know?
That's right.
Which is awesome. But yeah, we have some questions from the audience that we would like so we will have to actually phrase those questions ourselves. So I'll start with the one that was submitted before, and then we'll move to one that we just had asked in the question and answer prompt here. But if you're listening and you have questions, please type them up. And also, I didn't say this before, but if you can just quickly type in, where you stand, are you in school, where do you go, etc. Just a little more information about you. So I'll ask kind of the first question that was submitted. I mean, there was a couple one, and I like both, but I think it's more has to do with what you're working on right now, and what is the biggest threat to space sustainability today that you think isn't getting enough attention or is being ignored altogether?
That's a very, very interesting question and a very good question, because that's exactly what I'm working on today at Amazon Kuiper. What I've realized over the last 10 years or so working on this issue, we've looked at, again, data. It's so important to get back to what is real, what is not real, separate fact from fiction. And there is a little bit of fear in the public community out there that constellation operators, commercial operators are the ones that generate all the space debris and causing all these issues. But if you actually look at the data, it's further from the truth. So the data says, we went back to the NASA space debris catalog and we did an analysis, and you can trace back the ownership of all the different space debris pieces. And we find out that this was actually published at the European Space Debris Conference in April. We find out that 94% of the space debris actually traces back to government legacy satellites and anti-satellite testing. Only 6% of debris has some commercial background. So that is really the biggest threat. It is national security missions, it is anti-satellite testing, it is using old legacy systems, and not following the best practices that are out there. Most of the space debris was actually generated before 2000. 2000 is about the time where commercial activities really started to pick up. And the commercial entities have really, and government entities too, have learned a lot from the last decades of space activities. And so the biggest threat is, big threat is not following those best practices, like not removing your upper stage rocket bodies, leaving them back behind in high orbits that take hundreds of years to demise. And there's a number of other best practices that really have had a huge impact on the space debris environment. And you can really see a drop. If it weren't for anti-satellite testing, you would have seen a very big drop in the space debris environment.
That's a good message because I mean, when we don't know something but we have some data, I think maybe the message here is to look at the data first. And actually something I think scientists do very well, right? They are we our scientific and our scientific method is almost like a best practice that we have to stick to it. And it's almost unnatural for us to follow those best practices. So I appreciate that. Rihanna, would you like to take one from the prompt? And we have four there, and then we have another one in the chat, so we have plenty of questions.
Yeah, and we have some really fantastic questions, but I do want to prioritize some of the student questions first. So we have from Benjamin Davis, what are some opportunities out there, especially in the space industry, for international students? And how can international students navigate the issue of limited access to internship opportunities in physics and the space industry?
Um, that is a very valid concern. Unfortunately, there are very specific restrictions on ITAR and export control when it comes to space technology. So a number of American companies are experiencing those issues in hiring international students. However, I would say there is a need, and I see this actually happening in Europe. Europe is planning to invest hugely in different types of space activities. There's lots of very smart and intelligent people and innovative people in Europe as well. High quality engineering. And I think there's opportunities globally developing in space activities. Space is, while it's still hard, it is becoming more and more, I wouldn't say mainstream, but open to new innovative ideas and activities. And so, for example, at Amazon, we're a globally operating company. Well, we may not be hiring a satellite engineer with an international background in the factory. We have locations across the world. I work with Amazon Kuiper people in London, in Dubai, in Singapore, in Australia, and a number of those in London, a number of those are, international, have non-US citizenships. So it is possible, and I think the tide is shifting away. As again, I said earlier, there are a number of investments happening outside of the United States. Space is becoming much more accessible. Technology is becoming more accessible. And it's up to the next generation to have those innovative ideas and build the next successful enterprise. Right? And so I think while the United States has some restrictions on international, I think the opportunities are there and going to be much more there in the future.
That's great to hear. And I just throw a pitch for like why SPS is here. SPS is here to connect you with kind of a network of 70,000 folks that have gone through. And some of those folks have stayed in the US, some of them have gone back, right, to the country. So making sure that network serves you. Also, we have the International Association of Physics Students as a very strong partner to SPS. And these are students from all over the world also looking at opportunities across different sectors, including space. But what you said is right. I mean, there is this industry is growing worldwide, and it's probably worth it also exploring that as well. Thanks for that answer. Rihanna, do you have another from a student that you want to?
Sure. We have one from Savannah Koffel. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. They say, thanks for taking the time to talk with us today, smiley face. As someone who's done a couple of space slash engineering internships at this point, SpaceX, aerospace corporations, but primarily works in a CS systems lab in school, I'm looking to find my niche in the aerospace industry as a computer scientist slash physicist. How would you advise students like me who have a bit of an idea about the demands of the industry but are approaching it from a non-traditional background?
I think it's really important to get the fundamentals first, right? I mean, my career, you can kind of look at it in different ways. Do you get the the fundamentals, the hardcore science first, and then pursue like a policy as an interest? You learn it by doing, or do you do it the other way around? I think the other way around is actually much more harder, right? Yes, you can be an English major and you can pursue space policy, but then I think it's becoming really hard to start pursuing a career and getting a PhD in the hardcore science field. But that being said, there is a large number of opportunities, and I can only look at this point just because I have the number on top of my head. There, Amazon Kuiper, for example, has 600 openings right now, and those are globally. So I think my advice is to get the technical foundation first if you want to pursue a more policy or regulatory world, because that is so critically important when you that you're able to talk with confidence about a highly technical field, right? It's different when that comes from somebody with the technical background compared to with somebody who has a different background. So I think space is opportunities are growing. It's a growing field, and you do not have to be don't have to have a very specific major, right? It depends on where you're coming from or where you want to go. But there's lots of opportunities for computer scientists and engineers, and when it comes to building hardware, even machinists, right? Plumbing, machinists, electrics, all that stuff contributes to and is needed in the future because it is a growing field, and there will be lots of opportunities with lots of different backgrounds.
Thanks, Joseph. I'm going to ask one that I think is really interesting because it sort of kind of sits at the intersection of your, I guess, of your life trajectory, starting from the fundamentals to what drove your interest to where you sit now. This question is from George Herbert, and they say, small LEO satellite constellations like Kuiper, Starlink, and other efforts have both enormous societal benefits, but also will interfere with terrestrial astronomical observations. How do we effectively deconflict both efforts?
Very good question. And being an astronomer, this is a really important topic for me as well, right? So I feel for the astronomy community. And I remember my internships for 2 summers. I went to Chile, La Silla, the European Southern Observatory, doing infrared observations. And I remember even back then, many decades ago, there were satellites flying through my field of view and planes. And so it's not a new problem. It's an old problem, but maybe the magnitude is different, right? And so we at Amazon Kuiper, and know a little bit also about about other constellation operators, we take this very seriously. And so we have developed a very unique dielectric mirror, a film that is reflecting sunlight away. We can also tilt our satellites to some degree to not shine a bright light down onto the observatory. But that film is really unique because the big flat surface is our flat panel antenna that's at the bottom of the satellite, right? That's where you have your transmissions and your connectivity going through, right? These are big flat panel antennas. And so you need to have something, a solution that you do not lose any signal strength, so no attenuation going through that film that you're sticking on. And we actually were able to work with a supplier and develop a custom-made dielectric film that is fully transparent in the wavelength bands that we're using for the connectivity, but in the visual light, it's reflecting the sunlight away. And so all of our satellites are getting that film. Now we're doing also some stuff to the solar arrays, the solar cells, but satellites are not a box, right? They have lots of edges and hinges and different things sticking out, right? You cannot just stick something on there on every single edge. So we're also using, have developed our own modeling capabilities to sort of in-house assess what the brightness would be. We're also doing some ground-based observations we're working with the astronomy community to measure the reflectivity of our satellites. So we're really doing a lot in that regard, driving to minimize that impact on the astronomy. And same thing for radio telescopes, right? We do not want to transmit directly into their line of sight. The foresight avoidance is very important. Good news is we're far away from the protected frequencies for radio astronomy, right? The ITU has specifically set aside a series of frequency bands that are protected for radio astronomy. Our bands are far away from that, so we can steer our beams around the observatories so they don't get transmissions into that area. Because we've decided to use different types of more innovative technologies. All the technologies are, less versatile in that regard. There are a number of satellite operators that don't have that choice. They cannot steer their beams around. They basically light up everything to the detriment of the astronomy community. And so, in summary, this is a really important topic to us. And we're continuously investing and trying out new things. And the other good news is because we're building the satellites ourselves, we have opportunities to do block upgrades, right? When we find out something's not working, we can try a new version of the film or something different, right? So we have those opportunities. If you just have one satellite or just a handful of satellites, you don't have those opportunities for making continuous upgrades, right? So that's a big advantage.
I love that answer because I think, you being an astronomer, you have such a passion for astronomy, and now being where you are, it's sort of you're an advocate for innovation, right? To protect that field which you love. So I love that. Rihanna, do you want to ask the next one? I think we have another good one there.
Yeah. And yeah, I didn't know about any of that. That's really interesting. Thank you. So from MJ Keller, we have, what non-academic position gave you the most transferable skills for your current career?
What non-academic positions? That's an interesting question. Most transferable skills. I can't really pinpoint a particular position. I mean, when I was a teenager, I've worked so many different jobs. Like as a surveyor, I was holding the mirror, surveying the streets. I was working in a bookstore trying to sort through getting ready for the next school year and delivering all the school books to all the different schools in the area. I've worked as a tutor in a computer science center. And that's something, I guess even my family looks back at it and says, hey, can you fix my Wi-Fi, or can you fix my cell phone? So it's everything that you do has a different, makes you more complete, right? You never be complete, but is adding a puzzle piece to who you are, right? Every internship, every job that I did is adding something. It's really hard to say which one is more valuable than that. But I mean, yeah, overall, it's the fundamentals are just so important, right? My studies in physics and astronomy taught me how to go back and pursue the truth, trying to look at the data instead of, yeah, this could be the case or not the case. Let's just look at the data, right? It's a sense of let's have a hypothesis, but then also let's measure it, right? The scientific method. But other opportunities or jobs that I had, for example, at the Pentagon, were more about how do you build connections with others and present your case to the other departments, so you can shape the environment, or you can shape their thinking about it. You can present a convincing argument, but also recognize all the other departments and agencies have different requirements, right? Different goals, right? Department of Commerce is for commerce. NASA is looking really towards preserving exploration. DoD is for national security, right? And how do we bring all this together? So I think my answer is really, it's a puzzle piece, right? Every single position that you have is adding to your puzzle piece, right?
I love that because the Pentagon has a nice way of breaking you and building you back up from being there 5 years. And I think, everybody comes with something they think is great. And then, the leader that you're talking to, it will tell you that it isn't so great and you need to change this and this and that. And you learn from that. And that is accepting all that feedback is in itself a very good transferable skill. So I appreciate that. We have time for, I guess, one more question. Rihanna, do you have one you would like to select or?
Sure. I will give the last one to Udith Dushantha, who said that they would love to hear some kind of unforgettable obstacle or moment that you faced while following your passion and how you overcame it.
Unforgettable obstacle. I mean, in your life, you always, things never go smoothly, right? There's always not a roadblock or a speed bump. There's always somebody who's just opposed to the way you're thinking about it. That's a difficult one. I don't really have a good answer for that right now. An obstacle. Yeah, I would need to think about this a little bit more. I mean, I can think of just the research I was pursuing, or, yeah, maybe actually one example I had that's more research related is I was trying to solve a problem in space weather modeling. And I needed just an input value. It's like a coordinate number for assigning my data point to that coordinate. But in order to calculate that coordinate number, I needed to run another model, but it takes like 2 or 3 seconds for that model to complete and give me the number where I put that data point, because it's integrating along magnetic fields and fairly complex line integration along the magnetic field. So it takes 2 or 3 seconds, but I just needed sort of to plot to put that data point in the right place. And I was like, but I had thousands and millions of data points that I needed to calculate. So I was like, well, if I really need to do this, then this is going to take forever. I do not have the time. This is taking too long. And I started thinking outside the box a little bit. And this was at a time where machine learning algorithms are started to being used in physics-based modeling. And I started doing more research, and I was really fascinated by what you can do just with a neural network. And I realized that I could actually replace this whole physics-based computational model that only gives me a coordinate number, not the data point, just a coordinate number. I could replace this with a neural network. And this was just so fascinating in my career. I was having this roadblock because I could not make progress on doing actually the physics analysis, the research I wanted to do. I needed to put the data points in the right place. And I started talking to some other people, and they helped me with putting together a neural network. And we created a surrogate model for this huge computationally expensive model. And we were able to reproduce that at 1 million times faster by just using a machine learning technique that was so widely used elsewhere, but we were able to bring it into this field. And so obstacles always come with opportunities, right? It's a matter of deciding, is this something you can figure out or talk to other people who maybe can give you some more inspirations? Or is it just too hard? Right? And that's a choice you have to make for yourself. I mean, every situation is different. Well, for me in Austria, growing up there and wanting to become an astronaut, this was just too hard, right? I could not become an astronaut. Now I'm way too old. But there are always obstacles that you're presented with, and you need to decide, is this worthwhile digging down into and solving and creating an opportunity of it? But every situation is different.
Awesome.
For
Wow,
being so
thank
unsure. That was a
So,
great answer.
we have 4 minutes, so I want to have a little time to remind folks about about something, and maybe just one word or two of advice for folks specifically looking to go into science policy. I know if you have a background in space policy, I will say mine has been on education policy, but all related to moving the STEM fields along, right? And innovation. What would be your two words or one?
I think for people who are interested in pursuing this more social science, broader career, I think my real advantage was always to have finished my technical training, right? I did my master's, I did my PhD, and trust me, every PhD will make you cry. You can be so tough no matter what, but it will make you cry. I had a number of bad moments myself. I remember my wife, similar situations. It's really, the key is to finishing, right? It is very hard, but the key is to finishing. But when you're done, you have now the training, not just the technical training, but the way of looking at a seemingly insurmountable problem. You have a way of dividing it up, slicing and dicing into more digestible pieces that can be solved, and then putting it back together in the end. And I think that particular training as a physicist or scientist in general is just so tremendously helpful, no matter what you pursue later on. Because if you do enjoy learning broader things and going into a policy field or social sciences, I think you have then the tools within you to look at seemingly difficult and insurmountable problem, be able to slice and dice them into something that is solvable. So my advice is get the technical degree first, finish. I know it's hard, but then be open to new ideas, right? When you're done with that core, hardcore technical training, I think the world is open. Opportunities will come to you. You can look at it. You can decide, is this something you want to add to yourself as a portfolio? Is this adding a new puzzle piece? Is this interesting? Are you passionate about it? Or is maybe the time not right? I have many things that I said, no, the timing is not quite right. This can be a family reason, can be location, number of different things, right? Sometimes the timing is not right. But be open to explore and be brave. I think those are my pieces of advice.
Thanks, Joseph. So with that, we really want to thank you for your time. Want to thank you for being one of our hidden physicists and astronomers, for sharing your story and your your tips for moving along this journey that we're all pursuing, right? And I love the being brave. So we appreciate you, and I would like everyone to stay tuned for more of these webinars, more of these journeys, these amazing versatile stories. And I also want to remind you that this year is a special year. We have the Physics and Astronomy Congress that is happening in Denver, Colorado, October 30th to November 1st. It is a gathering of 1,200 undergraduates pursuing those careers that you're here to hear about. and it's jam-packed with activities that are just for your growth, from technical talks to very much about, you know, flexing your transferable skills and just having fun. So look into that. There's a QR code you can scan. But with that, I want to thank you, Joseph, for being the first one. And Rihanna, anything you want to say before we
Thanks for
close?
having me.
Thank you,
Yes.
Joseph.
Yeah, thank you again. That was absolutely fantastic. And thank you to everyone who's able to attend and all of the great questions that were submitted. I'm sorry to everyone who didn't get their question asked, but they were all fantastic.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And with that, without further ado, I'm going to close this session, and I hope you have a beautiful long weekend and enjoy Labor Day.